Okay, Crossfire lovers. I just wanted to make a video on the push button start install. There's been a lot of misconceptions out there, and people think you'll ruin your electrical system and this and that and da 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 da. It's not true, and I'll show you the install. I've got two kits here, and the reason I have two kits is this is a kit that came out of a Crossfire I sold recently. The buyer wasn't he was a little nervous, I think, about the push button start, so he asked me to take it out before he took the car. So I did. It took me about 30 minutes to unplug everything and go back to stock. It was not an issue, but I'm showing you this one because I'm going to be installing this one today. It's a newer kit, and this has the passive fobs. So all you got to do is have this in your pocket. When you get within a few feet of the car, it will activate the module, and then you can push the button to start the car. On this one, it's not a passive fob. It has this antenna, and I always put mine down there on the left side of the console, behind the left side of the console there, right about where your knee would be when you're driving. And then you can either just wave this fob in front of it when you want to start the car, or I had a little tiny iridium, not iridium, one of those neo iridium magnets or whatever. I had it glued up there about 2 inches above where the antenna was, so that when I hung this fob on the magnet, the fob itself would hang down right in front of the antenna. And it's got to be pretty close. If you're far away, it won't work. And that would activate it. And so this kit, I bought two of them a few weeks ago when I saw them come out, and I put one on my little right-hand drive Japanese mini truck over there, and it works fabulous. But now I look on Amazon and it says unavailable, and I couldn't find it anywhere else. So I don't know what the deal is. So if you decide you can't find this one and you want to use this one, I'm just explaining the difference of them. With this one, you're going to have the antenna, and this fob, you have an extra step. This one, passive fobs, just has to be in your pocket, and then it'll automatically activate the module. There are some kits that I've seen for about 45, 50 bucks that have the push button start with the passive fobs. They're larger fobs. I really like these because these are tiny little guys, and they even come with a tiny little ring to attach to your bigger ring because the holes in here are really small. So it's really nice. But I have seen the kits for about 50 bucks or so, but they also include either a remote start and or an alarm or something like that. And I'm pretty sure you could just hook it up and use the push button start function, because I believe these wiring connectors, they're the same. They're the same on this one and this one. They're identical. So I think it would work. I'm just not 100% sure that the unit will, the push button start will work independent of everything else. Like if you don't have the power door locks and you don't have the alarm or whatever else it's made to do, if you don't have that hooked up. I think it will, but I can't swear to that. So if, and I haven't had a chance to test one. So if you can't find this one and you want something that's 100% sure bet, this is your one, and they're like 23 bucks, I think, now on Amazon. And so other than that, the kits are the same. And so what I've done is I've already set up this kit for the install. There's 6 wires coming out of the main connector that plugs into the back of the brain, and each one of those wires is, for your accessory, on, start, run, that kind of thing. The only thing you'll need to do is on the red wire, which is constant power. I put a pigtail on the red wire from the Banvie unit. Banvie's the manufacturer that there's other manufacturers, but I've always bought the Banvie units and I've had good luck. So I made a little pigtail because in the connector that you're going to be plugging these into, there's 2 number 30 connections, and so you'll need these. It'll probably work with just one, but I've just always done it with 2. And then on this, This is some kind of a reset button, and it plugs in back here, and it has one wire that's not connected. This is going to be your power wire for the module. On this unit, I'm going to connect this to constant power, so I won't have to do anything. On the old units, I always connected it into the parking lamp circuit so that I had to turn the parking lamps on to give it power. The reason I did that is because these kits are designed to connect into your brake light circuit like the modern cars are. But on the Crossfire, the brake light circuit does not work when the ignition is off. So you don't get power until the ignition's on. So it defeats the purpose. So I always did that, but then I've had some discussions recently with people, and we feel that there shouldn't be any problem with just wiring it to constant power. So I'm going to do that with this one and test it. But just to let you know, you can do it either way. All right. And I've already put the bullet connectors on these, and I put the heat shrink and everything on there, and I've labeled these wires. What the labeling is on the female connector that comes off of the ignition housing right there. Each wire has a number, and I'll show it to you in a second. But the number on the connector corresponds to a color on the band V harness here. So for instance, white off the band V corresponds to number 15 on your connector here. And I'll show you this. If this will zero in on there, you can see, maybe, I hope it's focused enough, but you can see the numbers right under each one of those male pins. There's 30, there's 50, there's 15X. Well, those all correspond to these numbers here. And the female connector that's in the dash that connects to this has the numbers on it as well. Let me get this off my arm. So anyway, each one of these wires, there's a 15X, there's the two 30s because there's two of those connectors that are 30. And all we're doing with the bullet connectors, the reason I'm doing that is that just replicates the bullet connectors in the ignition housing. So we'll plug these right into the female connector that's behind the dash and set this up. A couple other things you're going to need. You will need a washer. Either one. I bought a fender washer today. I normally buy a regular washer that has a bigger hole in here, but since I bought the fender washer, I had to cut a little channel in here, and that channel is just to give a way for the wires off the push button start, to go in there and to go through. So what you're going to do is this push button has 4 little flanges that stick out from it, and I'll put some still pictures of that in there, and they stick out like a star kind of, and that's made so you can bend them, put it into the dash, and then bend them back, and it holds it into the dash. Well, you can't really do that with this setup. So I usually just bend those up, and then I cut them off with either a Dremel or a cutoff wheel on a grinder, and just make sure you don't cut the wires. Just be really careful on these two down here where you're cutting the wires off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this onto the washer. And the reason I use the washer is that the hole in the dash where the ignition tumbler is bigger than the push button. So you can't just put that in there. This will just go through the hole. Even when you put the little rubber gasket around it, it will actually cover the hole, but I mean, this is just flimsy. It's just made to cover this thing. So in order to provide some support to cover that hole, get yourself a washer that's 2 inches in diameter. Just make sure it's 2 inches in diameter, and then you're going to glue the button to it right here, and then on the back side you're going to put glue on this and then glue that onto the dash, and then you'll put this little rubber trim ring around it, and that will, I can't do a very good job with one hand here, but anyway, you'll see it when it's in the car. That will cover the washer, so you won't see it. and that will give you a real solid mounting surface for the push button. And if I always use weather strip adhesive to do that, and if you ever need to take it out, it'll stay in there very securely, but if you ever need to take it out, you can just go around it gently with a flat blade screwdriver all around and just pry it off, and it will come off, and it won't ruin the dash or anything. The weather strip adhesive can be cleaned off very easily. And then the other thing you're going to need is your transponder chip. Okay, I took the one out of this fob today. Normally I wouldn't need that, because I'm eventually going to send the Scream and the ECU from this car to Josh Chase over at the MSS to have him do a tune and a key delete. And I'm going to put a plug in for his key delete. Everybody knows about his tunes. They're wonderful. But I'm going to put a plug in here about the key delete. I'm really surprised that more people don't do it. With the key delete, what it does is it totally takes out the immobilizer function from the Scream out of the system. So when you get the ECU and the Scream back from Josh, you put the Scream back in, but you only have to plug in the one connector that works your remote locks. The part that is the immobilizer for the ignition system and everything else, you don't plug that in, and it plays no part in the system anymore. So you don't need the transponder chip. So if I already had that done, I wouldn't even need to bother with this. But since I haven't had the key delete done yet, what we're going to have to do is tape this to the antenna ring, and then I'll just zip tie it up behind the dash, and that way the car will think that the key is in there, the original key. And just a word of advice: when you're taking this out of your fob, go somewhere, like I usually go in the corner in the dining room, and I sit real close to the corner, and I'm very, very careful about doing it, and I try to hold my hand over the top of it while I'm doing it, because sometimes that thing will just come right out easily. Sometimes if it's been glued in before or something like that, you have to pry it out, and when it goes flying, it's just like a spring. And so if you're doing this out in your garage, around all your stuff in the garage and everything else, and this thing goes flying, you'll never find it. So do yourself a favor, do it somewhere where if it does go flying, there's not enough stuff around where it can get, caught in, fall in, or whatever, and you can find it, and then you'll be okay. This thing will work fine, but the only problem you're going to have if you don't have the key delete is that for about 15 or 20 minutes after you shut the engine off and get out of the car, you're not going to be able to lock the car with the fob. You can lock it with a key, but you can't lock it with a fob, because I found this out, and Josh bench tested it and confirmed it when I did the first one of these. What it is since the transponder chip is in there taped to the antenna ring, the Scream's doing its job, because it's talking to the system, and it thinks you've left the key in the ignition because it's detecting that transponder chip. So it won't let you lock the car. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. But after the system goes totally to sleep and the transponder chip and the Scream stop talking to each other, then it'll work. But it took me a while to figure that out. So that's another benefit of having the key delete done. Then you don't have to worry about any of that. So I just wanted to get this one installed today, and I wanted to do the video on it. So I haven't had a chance to send it in, but I am going to have the key delete done, and I highly recommend that. Then you never have to worry about a Scream issue, for sure. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut this off. I'm going to drop the lower dash. This is just like doing a sticky key as far as the preparation. You drop the lower dash, and you have to take out the ignition housing. This is not the ignition housing from this car. It's from another one. Also, I've had a couple people who were doing this install using they weren't using my instructions, which was the problem. They were just using the instructions from the manufacturer, and most of them are people that are leaving their ignition housing in the car, so the steering lock is locking, so they have to take a key, put it in the ignition and turn it to accessory or whatever, and then cut the end of the key off just to defeat the steering lock and leave it there. With this install, you're completely removing the ignition housing and the steering lock, so you don't have to do any of that nonsense, okay? You don't have to leave a key in there. There's no place to put a key when you get done with this. So I'm going to drop the lower gash and get ready, and then I'll show how we plug this stuff in and then how it works. Okay, we've got everything hooked up, and I thought I would show you this. This is the big connector that goes on the back of the ignition housing, and so these are your wires from the push button start system. I've just pushed the bullet connectors in the female connectors in the big connector there, so they plug right in and they can pull right out. So everything's connected. Here's what I did. I've got a couple of still pics of it, but I'll show you. For the chip, okay, I just tucked it around the rubber lip that goes around the little gasket thing that goes around the antenna ring. I just tucked it in there and taped it in so it won't go anywhere. But then I also put a plastic bag around it, and I put a rubber band on here, and I'm just going to zip tie this behind the dash. But the plastic bag, if something terrible happens, which I don't expect it to, but if something happened and that chip was to vibrate out, it's not going to fall down in the innards of the dash somewhere and be lost forever or hard to find. So if that happens, I'll be able to find it real easy. But like I say, this isn't going to be here for long because I'm going to send my ECU and Scream in to Josh Chase at the MSS to do the key delete. So then this won't be needed. But that's all this is. This is plugged in here. What I am going to do is fold these up, and then I'll probably put a zip tie around them just so there's no stress on those connectors so they don't pop out. And then over here, I'll show you what I did if there's enough light. For the ground, if I can get in here, there's, I don't know if you can see it, but right in here behind the weather stripping for the door, to the left of the dash, there's a couple of 2 or 3 10mm bolts. I just take the bottom one, and then I just, on the ground wire, I just put a ring connector on it, and then put it on there, and screw that in. Makes a great ground. It works fine, and I'll show you right now that this thing works. If you just want it to come on and not start the engine, I've got it neutral, but just don't push the clutch in. And if you don't push the clutch in, the safety switch on the clutch will keep it from starting, but you can get it, it'll come on, watch. So you press this, all the lights on the dash come on and all that, but it doesn't start. So I'll press it again to turn it off. Now I'll press the clutch in, and we'll press the button. Works like a champ. So everything works great. That's as simple as it is. It's just making those connections with the bullet connectors and plugging them in, grounding the thing. Oh, and one thing I didn't put in the first video is that I wound up taking the power wire for the module, and I tapped it into one of the constant powers, one of the 2 that go on the connector here. So the module has power all the time, but so you can do it that way, or like I said, you can tap into the parking lights or somewhere else if you want. But I just tapped it in there so the thing has power all the time now. We'll shut it off. So now I'll get everything zip tied under the dash, and I'll put the dash back together, and then I'll take a little video of the finished assembly once I glue the button in here with the backing of the 2-inch washer. Okay, I have it buttoned back up, and here's the finished product. It's in place. Makes for a really nice, clean installation. I have the fob in my pocket, so now I'm just going to push the clutch in, press the button, starts right up. If the car has been started within the last probably hour or two, you can do just like I did, just press the button and release it, and I think it will go for 2 or 3 seconds and start it. If the car has been sitting overnight or something like that, or for several hours, you may have to just keep your finger on the button until it starts and then release it, and then it'll keep turning the starter over. But that's it. Remember, and this is a manual. I can't swear. All my cars are manual, so I can't swear on an automatic how this will work. But on this one, if you want, I'll show you again. If you want to just go to on instead of starting, you know, if you need to, if you're plugging your scanner or you want to listen to the radio or whatever it is, just don't push the clutch in. I've got the fob in my pocket. I'll press this and everything comes on. The radio will come on, all that stuff, but it won't start, okay? Press it again, it goes off. Then if you want it to start, press the clutch in, press the button, works like a champ. So that's how it works. If you've done a sticky key fix before, this install will probably take you an hour to an hour and a half, because it's almost like doing a sticky key, except instead of putting the ignition housing back in, you're just plugging those wires from the push button start module into the connector for the ignition housing. But that's it. No factory wires were harmed in the install of this at all. And I'll show you what I normally do on all of our Crossfires when I've done this. I just throw the ignition housing and the key in a plastic bag, and I keep it in the hatch in the back, so that if something ever happens and this push button start gives out for whatever reason, in about 20 to 30 minutes I can be back up and running. I just have to drop the lower dash, unplug those connectors, those bullet connectors, and then install this, plug the connector right into the back of it, turn the key, and we're good to go. So like I said, I had to do that a few weeks ago when I sold that other car, and I changed it back to stock. So I think I installed my first one on this 2 or 3 years ago, and I haven't had a failure yet. So these little boxes are pretty amazing. So anyway, that's how the install goes. And if you like that, then like I say, it's real easy. And you can tell, like the washer I was telling you about, the rubber gasket that goes over this, just the trim piece or whatever, it covers that, so it looks really nice. You can't see anything. And then I'll shut it off. So that's it. That's how it works.